Hello, Trekkies! This week we're going to try a new format. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to use Picard's mom's tea table. This is Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. We're going to start off by tearing into classic Trek at 506, Bluff, or the Corbomite Maneuver. 50 years before Baby Yoda, there was the equally as recognizable Baby Clint Howard. This episode is considered a classic, and as far as TOS is concerned, this is actually pretty good ranking. Kirk runs a high-stakes bluff against a 7-year-old that's running a high-stakes bluff against him. With all the smart dialogue comes a bunch of mediocre to bad plot devices. Starting with the default cube that blocks the Enterprise's path, and later the cluster of ping-pong balls that menacingly threatens the ship. The bulk of the runtime is a psychological stalemate, and until the big reveal of the only actor to have been involved in every era of Trek, Clint Howard, the brinksmanship thing wears thin long before the end of the episode, but it does introduce us to Tranya, and gives us a rare look at Uhura in the gold uniform. Trapping a Time Lord at 5:05, the Death Trap, or the Red Angel. This episode starts with a funeral that's the best part, before it all falls apart from there. Burnham gives Leland a bloody nose for being the one to give her parents the orders that put them on the planet they died on. Seems a bit excessive, though in general this guy's face is quite hittable. Admiral Cornwell shows us in one scene that she's a better counselor than Troy. This all culminates in the drawn-out death of Burnham. To try and lure the Red Angel to bring her back to life? This show really likes killing main characters and sometimes bringing them back to life. One final thing that puzzles me in this not-so-great episode of Disco is when Leland is infected with control through an eyepiece, why was there a needle in the eyepiece to begin with? Going to war with itself is number 504. God Civil War. Or the Q and the Gray. This may be the episode that's the most all over the place in terms of different things happening in Trek. Unlike Cupid, some of them are actually interesting and at the very least fun TV. The crew of Voyager becomes only the third Starfleet crew in history to see a supernova up close. They realize something is really off when several other stars go supernova in the area shortly thereafter. Turns out the Q Continuum are at war with each other, and our most familiar Q thinks that somehow mating with Janeway to produce a child will stop it, because reasons. He takes Janeway to the Continuum, portrayed this time as the American Civil War battlefield. In the end, Susie Q teaches the Voyager crew some technobabble to get the ship into the Continuum, to stop Q from making Janeway his baby mama. Then the questions outpace the answers until the end of the episode, where Jean de Q and Susie Q make Q2 by touching fingers. The one question I will ask: why is the devastation to life in the Delta Quadrant due to the Continuum's war creating multiple supernovas not explored even slightly through the rest of the run? This one is a The Burn level extinction event with no lasting repercussions. The 2 times in the episode where we cut on Kate Mulgrew's mouth hung open is one of the most forced and least acted bits by Janeway in 7 seasons. Jailed on trumped-up charges at 5:03, Shawshank O'Brien. Or the Tribunal. When O'Brien takes a reluctant vacation, he's abducted by the Cardassians, so they can score political points in a situation they set up to begin with. It's a good watch and builds Cardassian society for us, but makes Miles unnecessarily suffer. Again. As for a positive, I'll say Keiko is at her most empathetic of all her appearances. Roaming aimlessly at 5:02, Exodus. Or Prophecy. Fun fact: This group of fanatical Klingons that's been roaming the Delta Quadrant for over 100 years on a generation ship were the followers of T'Kuvma that left after his death in Season 1 of Discovery. In general, this feels like one of those tacked-on episodes to Voyager's 7th season that's not great, but is just interesting enough to be watchable. This group of rogue Klingons is looking for their next Klingon messiah, and believe they've found it in B'Elanna Torres' unborn child. So they blow up the ship that's gotten them tens of thousands of light years into the Delta Quadrant and force themselves to be Voyager's problem. We muddle through some Klingon rituals and resettle them on an uninhabited planet. Honestly, for me, the most interesting part of the episode is Neelix having relations with a ravenous Klingon woman in Tuvok's quarters. Playing Neelix for a fool at 501, death penalty ethics, or repentance. Here's an example of a decent premise, and the bulk of the runtime is pretty good. Though in the end, the morals of the story go a bit askew. Voyager responds to a distress call from a prison shuttle full of prisoners scheduled for execution. They save the guards and the prisoners. During their stint on board, one of the most violent prisoners is treated by the doctor with some of Seven's modified nanoprobes. In the process, part of his brain that was born disconnected becomes active, and he can finally feel remorse for what he's done in the past. He becomes the model prisoner to the point of staying in his cell when others stage a prison break, and even saving the warden's life. He's given an opportunity for a reprieve, which falls on deaf ears. In another plot that seems like it's going to be an analogy to African Americans in the US justice system, Neelix is talked up by an alien about how he's only in here because no one believes members of his race. Neelix starts to believe it, till the end, when it's shown that this guy really is a cold-blooded killer. Not the first time Voyager starts with a wonderfully progressive message and botches the ending. Disobeying orders at 500, New Risa, or Prime Factors. While we still have 499 episodes to rank after this marks being more than 1/3 of the way done with this project ranking all of Trek. Voyager receives a distress call, but not the kind you think. They're offering to relieve Voyager of their distress by giving them shore leave with an offer to give up on their 70,000 light-year journey and settle on this friendly planet. They also have some tech that can move people but not ships 40,000 light-years. When they refuse to trade for it, of all people, Tuvok defies orders and makes a black market trade for the tech that doesn't work anyway. Janeway gives him and his co-conspirators slaps on the wrist, and we wrap up this watchable but perfectly mediocre plot. Phasing out of existence at 499, The Boy. Or Where No One Has Gone Before. When an arrogant engineer is ordered to upgrade the Enterprise's engines with garbage technobabble, an accident sends the ship 3 galaxies over. When they try to get home, they end up outside the known universe where energy and thought are seemingly intertwined. The assistant to the worst engineer in Starfleet history is the cause, and it's his way of showing Wesley Crusher what's possible before disappearing in the end. This is quite a fun watch, and one of the few tolerable episodes of TNG Season 1. Wesley goes from being completely ignored and called the boy multiple times to an acting ensign by the end of this episode. Chasing a fugitive at 498, Secret Agent T'Pol. Or The Seventh. An episode called The Seventh at the 7th episode of the 2nd season. How quaint. Apparently, one of T'Pol's past Vulcan assignments was to hunt down 7 Vulcan fugitives, but one has remained at large for years. It brings up a bunch of repressed memories and emotions from T'Pol because she was never sure she was justified in killing one of the fugitives years earlier. This guy, played by the excellent Bruce Davidson, spends most of the episode convincing T'Pol he's the victim here and he's not the bad guy the High Command is making him out to be. Except that he is. And Archer ends up being T'Pol's anchor and helps bring him in. Mayweather is part of this episode, and as usual, doesn't have much to do or say. Thanks, writers and producers. An okay episode, but it feels like it had more potential that was wasted in a runtime that drags through the middle acts. Waxing poetic at 497. Eye for an Eye. Or The Darkness and the Light. Another episode that's absolutely great. Until a ridiculous ending. A Cardassian, pissed off at Kira's former resistance cell for an attack they carried out, goes about meticulously taking out Kira's friends in some pretty interesting ways, and sending taunting messages to her using her own voice. This episode is solidly interesting until the reveal of the man without a face, who speaks only in Shakespearean-style quips. A single-episode Trek villain whose methods are fun to watch, but whose overall reveal is the bottom of the barrel with Bejazzle.
Computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Majel. Majel. Thanks, Majel. Majel.
Sensors are reading photo lock-on activation.
Thanks, Majel.
Access to these quarters has been restricted.
Majel.